and purpose of donation. Please join me in welcoming Morgan Genjua, a donor mother whose daughter Kimber's heroic legacy continues to inspire and heal others. Morgan is here tonight to share her family's journey, a story of courage, loss, and profound love. Please welcome Morgan.
I'm Morgan, and it's truly an honor to be here tonight. I feel really grateful to be here with everybody in this space. And I know that for everyone to come together at the same time, everybody has to be vibrating on the same frequency. So for whatever reason, we're all here together, and I think that's really magical. So there's a few parts to my story, and I'm going to start by talking about the energy, the essence, and just the overall vibe of Kimber, my daughter. Kimber was born on April 10th, 2004 at 10:01 a.m. and from birth, she was an angel. She was such a good baby. She never cried. She was always so well behaved. I could take her anywhere. She always got so many compliments for her temperament and just how just amazing she was as a baby. And that carried over into her childhood as well. She was always very polite, very well behaved, and she had a strong moral compass from very early on. She always knew how to make the right decisions. You know, we were at a restaurant and the waitress dropped her whole tray, and before any of us could even say anything, Kimber was over there helping the lady pick up all of the stuff. Kimber volunteered with special needs kids in her school. She volunteered to help the lunch lady just out of the kindness of her heart because she felt bad for her. And Kimber had a deep love for animals and also for the elderly. And there was a time that Kimber and I, we were sitting on the couch watching TV, and you know that commercial that used to play, like Life Alert, where the lady is like, help, I've fallen and I can't get up. And I glance over at Kimber and she just has tears coming down her face. She felt so bad for that lady. But where Kimber could have a lot of empathy and feel bad for somebody even in a commercial, she still found the humor when for Valentine's Day I got her a card with that same lady that said, help, I've fallen for you and I can't get up. So that's how Kimber was. She embraced the softness of life while also embracing the humor in life. And she was definitely an old soul. I used to jokingly call her an old lady in a kid's body because Kimber and I were only 16 years apart. I was a teen mom, and I used to joke around that I made the show Teen Mom Fool before it ever aired. Before that happened. But yeah, Kimber was sometimes like the parent. I would be like, let's stay up late, watch a movie. And she's like, no, I need to be in bed by 8, I have a test tomorrow. So yeah, she was definitely an old soul, and that connects with her bond with my grandma, her great grandma. They were truly best friends. My grandma, we called her Bobby Boo Boo, and Kimber went to Bobby Boo Boo's house every day after school. They were like this dynamic duo. They were going to Bobby's doctor's appointments, taking the dogs to the vet, to the groomer. Pretty much everyone in the town knew like this dynamic duo. The older lady who my grandma was like very fabulous, blonde hair lady, and she never missed an opportunity. Any stranger, she would stop them and tell them about the whole family tree. My son owns an automotive shop, and my granddaughter is the manager of the family, and this is my great granddaughter. So, you know, people would be like standing there like waiting for this lady to stop talking, and then there'd be this polite little girl next to her, and so everyone in the town really knew them as this pair. And even Kimber was very serious about school. She got straight A's, and she did not play around when it came to her attendance. I was the one that was like, yeah, Rachel, I'd like to get out of that. You don't have to do PE. But she was actually the strict one. And when Bobby Boo Boo got her hip replaced, Kimber came to me in a panic, like, I need to miss a few days of school. Bobby's going to be in the hospital, and I need to be with her. And of course, I was like, sure, it's fine. You can miss a few days of school. And she was with Bobby every day in the hospital the whole time that visitors were allowed. She didn't leave until it was like, they're like, you gotta go. And she knew all the doctors, all the nurses. And that's just the type person that she was. She was very selfless. So by 2017, Kimber was 13. She was on the basketball team. She was fluent in Spanish. She was the vice president of her school council. And I was also excelling at life. I had been in a job that I had been excelling at for 10 years. And I had started my health and fitness journey of January of that year. I had lost 50 pounds. And Kimber was so proud of me, telling everyone, oh my gosh, have you seen my mom? She looks so good. So everything was going really great. And that brings us to October of 2017, and October 18th, 2017. And that was also started out as a really good day. I was having a normal day at work. I knew that Kimber was going to my grandma's house after school. I planned on going to the gym and then going to pick her up. So everything was great. And then it was the end of the day at work, and I had just gotten off the phone with my dad. So when one of my coworkers came and said, hey, your dad is on the phone again. I was like, what are you calling me again for? I was honestly like annoyed. And so I answered, and all he said was, don't leave the bank, I'm coming there. And I'm like, okay. So I still didn't think anything was like that wrong. I called Kimber, no answer. I called my grandma, no answer. But I still was like, okay. You know, we finished our closing procedures. I even told my coworkers, I'm like, you guys can leave, I'll wait for my dad. But they all stayed. And at the time I worked at a bank that was in a grocery store. And so I saw my dad and my uncle come walking in the store. And they came into the bank like behind the teleline. And my dad said, there's been a car accident. And in my mind, you know, car accident equals someone's in the hospital. So I'm like, okay, let's get to the hospital. Who's at the hospital? And my dad looks at me and he said, Kimber died. And that moment is when my life got split into two parts. Everything that happened before that and everything that happened after that. And I was truly in a state of shock. You know, all my coworkers were crying, and I was just standing there like, no, 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 no. And it did not seem real when my dad said, okay, we need to drive to the sheriff's department. So we get in the car, my uncle was driving, and my dad, like, my dad's a big, strong guy. He's 6'6", he's like, he'll arm wrestle anyone, he's a strong guy. And this is the first time that I've ever seen my dad just sob uncontrollably like this, like a child. And it still wasn't real for me until we got to the sheriff's department, and the sheriff handed me Kimber's phone, and her phone was all cracked and covered in her blood, and the GPS was still navigating them to Walmart, but they did not make it there. They were on their way, and they were struck on the passenger side by a cement truck. And Kimber was killed instantly on the scene, and my grandma passed away right as they lifted her up into the care flight helicopter. So that's when it started to feel like it was my reality, even though every day I woke up and felt like I was living in a nightmare. But that night, my whole family was at my grandma's house, and we were all gathered around, and that's when I got the call, which I'm sure everyone in here could be familiar with that call, but most people aren't, and that's the call from the Nevada Donor Network. And for me, out of all the decisions I made in those weeks after the accident, that one was honestly the easiest one, because I knew Kimber so well, and I knew what she would have wanted, and it was almost like she was making the decision for me instead of me making the decision. And I've said this many times, but I was very grateful to the gentleman that I was speaking with on the phone that night, because he was so nice. And I just remember telling him, just please tell them to be gentle with her. So after that, I spent a long time just trying to breathe again. My world that was full of color and light was suddenly gray, and I felt like I had absolutely no purpose. My career that I worked so hard in for over a decade suddenly meant nothing to me. All of the goals, all the titles, I just did not care about it anymore at all. So I knew that I had to make a change because I could not just go back to the life that I had lived before without my daughter. So I released my career that I had had. I released my hometown that I had lived in my entire life and where my family lived. I cashed out my 401k so that I could live and invest in myself. And I embarked on a path that I did not know where it was leading me, but I knew it could get me somewhere if I just focused on the next 200 feet in front of me. So for the first year, I barely left the house because I could not stop crying long enough to leave the house. But through focusing on myself, still focusing on my health and fitness, just really leaning into my own basic needs and self-care, I started paying attention to what I was doing when I felt a little bit good. Not like the grief had left, but there was some joy mixed in. And a lot of times where I felt that was doing events where my daughter was honored. You know, Kimber was honored at the Rose Bowl parade. That gave me a lot of joy to go to that. I got involved with grief groups and I started facilitating groups for bereaved parents. And I realized that bereaved parents, we always say like, it's a club that you never want to be in. But one thing I love about bereaved parents is you just get it. There's no words that need to be spoken. There's no sympathy that needs to be given. You just get it. And during those times, I started feeling like there was some purpose in my life. There was some hope again. And I also got the courage to do some solo traveling, which is something that made me nervous before. But after you lose your child, it's like, what do I have to lose? Nothing else worse can happen. So I did a lot of solo traveling. I went on a spiritual journey. I learned about all different types of healing modalities, from crystals to Reiki to doing ayahuasca in the jungle for 7 days. And through all of this, I found that my purpose was in showing others that grief and joy can live side by side within one person. And on this journey, I've healed a lot when it comes to my grief journey, not just with this, but with my trauma in my childhood and a lot of things that I've been carrying for a long time. And I thought, what did I need in those early years of grief? And how could I become that for other people? And that is when everything changed. Because it wasn't about erasing my pain, it was about turning my pain into purpose. And so I started doing workshops, I started teaching people how to manifest not just through their grief, but through their grief. And that's what sparked the fire that is now my business, High Frequency Coaching, where I get to help people manifest their grief, achieve their goals, and find light in their life where it really feels like they're only in the dark. And I get to do something every single day that honors my daughter, Kimber. And something that I've learned through these 8 years that I think of often is that grief definitely doesn't end, but it does have the potential to change shape. So, thank you, and Kimber forever.